Hello. Oh, am I live? You may have just seen me tidying my desk if anyone is here. Hello. I am Rachael Johns. You can probably see with my big, massive, silly poster that's still standing behind me hanging out after my launch of my latest book. Sorry, I'm just looking over here. Unable to connect to chat. It is not good. 2 seconds while I do some technical stuff. Well, live chat room to guide you. Unable to connect to chat. This is a problem. If anyone wants to say anything on the chat, if there is anyone watching, then I can see if it responds. But anyway, so far it's saying unable to respond to chat, which is not good because the whole idea of tonight is for me to tell you a little bit about myself, about my writing, to talk about the styles of books I write, and to answer any questions that anyone may have to do with books or writing. I'm just going to take my glasses off. Do I look smarter and more professional with glasses on? Anyway, let's pretend that I can connect to the chat and hope that if anybody posts anything, I'll be able to see it. Otherwise, it's just going to be me talking to myself. It says there's one person watching. So hello, whoever you are. If you're feeling game, can you try and comment in the chat group on the side? Because, sorry, I'm just going to see where it says learn more. I hope you can still see me. I'm actually going into a little YouTube help thing, telling me why I cannot see people, why I cannot do the chat. No. Okay. Unfortunately, I can't see any. I won't be able to do the chat thing. So let's pretend I'm starting again. My name is Rachael Johns. I am an Australian author, as you can probably tell by my voice, of two different types of novels. I started writing rural romance. I'm going to show you my latest rural romance here. Rural romance is kind of self-explanatory. It's romance books set in rural towns. I took a long time actually to get published, 15 years, which is something maybe I should have a little bit of chat about, talk about in a minute, so that anyone out there who's trying to get published and, is struggling to get their voices heard by publishers or struggling to get feedback on books, maybe my story will be a bit inspiring for you. So I started rural romance, and then I also, once I got published, after a few years, I had an idea that wasn't a rural romance book. The idea started as a rural romance. It was a book called The Patterson Girls, and it was actually inspired by a weed that I saw when driving through the wheat belt in Western Australia, where I lived. And I'm not a farmer, but I lived in small towns for quite a while, hence why I started writing rural romance. And I love country towns. I love the whole lifestyle of everyone knowing everybody and just helping each other. Out in an emergency, I experienced a number of things living in my small towns, which were big town disasters, and it was amazing how everyone just came together and helped each other out. So that's one of the things I love writing about small towns. So I was driving through this wheat belt and I saw a beautiful paddock of purple flowers. Well, I thought they were purple flowers. Turns out they were a weed called Patterson's Curse. And when I asked my friend about the weed, she was like, oh, my God. Well, I didn't say it was weed then. I said, oh, what's that gorgeous purple flower? And she's like, oh, my gosh, that's a weed. And she sort of started telling me all the things that this toxic plant could do. And after she'd calmed down, and I was like, sorry, I just thought it was a pretty flower. After she'd calmed down, she said, that would be a really good title for a book. Anyway, I'd always loved reading books by people like Marianne Keyes, Kathy Kelly, Leah Moriarty, Lisa Jewell. And so it's not kind of surprising that I decided to write that kind of story, but I'd never thought about writing a story myself that wasn't a straight romance book. Well, not for a while. I'm kind of going all over the place here. I should go back to the beginning. Maybe I will in a minute. But anyway, I said, oh, yeah, that's a great title for a book, Patterson's Curse. And immediately I started thinking about a romance novel where there was a love curse. And I was like, okay, yeah, thought about this for a while, tried to work out how it worked. And then suddenly in my head, the idea for a story about a curse, not a love curse, but a family curse came. And as soon as I worked out what the curse is, and I won't say because there's spoilers, I realised this really is not going to work as a rural romance. It's more a family drama story. It's a story of 4 sisters trying to disprove this family curse. So I went to my publisher and I said, I'd like to write a book that's a little bit, different to what I've usually written. It's more about this relationship between 4 sisters. So I guess what I'm trying to say is I write 2 different genres, but the move to the second genre was kind of an organic one. My very first publication was rural romance, and that's where I sort of got my start. As it happens, my latest book is rural romance. All my stories, I think, although not all my books are romance books, half of them are romance novels, and the other half now, or probably not exactly half, never been good at maths, the other half are, what did I say, not half, the rest of them are what we call women's fiction novels, which that's a problematic term sometimes within itself. So I like to call them life-lit books. They're books about real issues that mostly women, but contemporary people deal with in everyday life, but, obviously, hopefully a bit more interesting. But what I say is all my books are relationship stories. So they may not be focused on the romance, but they're definitely focused on relationships. Now, I'm very concerned because there's a couple of wonderful people watching. Hello, whoever you are. I can see that. But unfortunately, my live chat thing is not working. Now, I have had an idea about maybe I can pretend to be on another computer and maybe the live chat will work up here. So let's see if I can do that for a moment. If anyone's got any questions, then you'll be able to ask me. Sorry about this. I'm just going up onto my other computer to see if I can get this live chat thing to work. Okay, it's saying live now. Okay. Ooh, let me turn myself off. Okay, good. You can't hear me. Welcome to the live chat. Okay, that seems to be working there. So if anyone's got any issues or anyone wants to ask any questions, I will keep looking up to my other computer so I see them. So yeah, today I was going to talk a little bit about rural romance and my latest book, but I don't know if I maybe should also just go back a few years and tell you how I got my start. So I was never one of those writers who read a lot when I was a child. I loved all the Babysitter's Club books. My mum read Enid Blyton and all that kind of stuff. I didn't hate reading. I enjoyed it, but it was not my first choice of thing to do in high school. My first choice of thing to do in high school was stalk boys, or rather one boy. I was madly obsessed with this one guy. And so I did okay in high school English, but I never actually read any of the books. Actually, I read one book, and that was Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. But what I did is I managed to get through high school English by reading those York Notes books, the little yellow sort of blue things. And they told you the themes, the characters, they gave you sample questions, so you didn't actually have to read the book. I'm very disgusted and upset that I did this because there's so many books that I could have read in that time rather than wasting my time, wasting my time stalking boys instead. But anyway, so reading and writing wasn't, high up on my agenda of things to do. It was never something I thought about doing for a career. I actually always wanted to be a primary school teacher. Then I broke up with my high school sweetheart towards the end of year 12. I shouldn't say I broke up. I accidentally dumped him. It is possible to do. So we had a bit of a kind of discussion. I didn't kind of agree with what he said one day, and then I said, I said, I don't think this is working out, hoping that he'd say, no, Rachel, you're the love of my life, don't leave me. But he didn't. He said, yeah, I think you're right. So I accidentally dumped him. We broke up, and I was gutted, as only 17-year-old girls can be. I thought my life was over. I was never going to, find anybody else, and blah, blah, blah. For some reason, when I was in that state of devastation, I decided to write a book. I'd never tried, writing anything before, really, apart from English assignments, which they were giving us at school. So I wrote this book over the summer holidays between finishing year 12 and starting uni, and it was an absolutely terrible book. I really don't think you can call it a novel. I didn't know anything about writing books, because to be a writer, you have to be a reader. That's always my first tip when anyone says, what's a good tip for starting writing a book? Make sure you're reading lots, reading everything you can get your hands on. So I had a lot of catching up to do, and I am a reader now, and I read constantly all the time. But I wasn't back then, so I knew nothing about writing books. But I wasn't going to let that stop me, because I was also 17, and we have these high ideals about we can do anything. Anyway, so I wrote this thing, we're not going to call it a book, about me and this boy, and it was really boring. We were cardboard cutout characters, even though we were based on real people. It was everything we'd ever said to each other, which was not much because most of the 4 years that I was madly in love with him, he spent running the other direction. Anyway, even then I knew you can't end a book by accidentally dumping someone. So I gave him a horrific disease and I killed him off. And it was such good therapy for me. So I came to writing as a form of therapy. And I can joke about that now. Sounds kind of funny. But it wasn't at the time. And writing really did help me work through my emotions and my feelings. And I know a number of people, I feel like there's sort of two types of writers. There's either those writers who have wanted to be a writer all their life since they were very little. And, their mums have got books that they wrote when they were 5 and 6 and 7 or whatever. And then there's the other type like me. And often that's because people that come to it because they sort of feel compelled to write about a tragedy or something they've dealt with. And I know a number of writers who have come to writing through therapy. So that's how I started. And then I stupidly decided, you know what, I'm going to ditch this whole primary school teaching idea. I'm going to become a famous writer. What should I do to become a famous writer? I'll go to uni and do a writing degree. I'm just checking. No questions yet? I have no idea if there's any questions or I'm just missing them. So I apologise if I am missing them. Anyway, I changed to a writing degree in the very early days of writing degrees, and I can't say it was a good decision. It was probably I can tell you I learned absolutely nothing about writing books during my writing degree. One of the main problems, I suppose, was that apart from the fact they weren't teaching anything like, the books require conflict, the characters need to have goals and they need to be chasing things and there need to be motivation for those goals. They didn't teach us anything like that. What the big thing they told us, basically, that the message that I got was that I should be writing a book that might one day win the Booker Prize, or poetry. Poetry was fine. Unfortunately, I wanted to be writing the kind of book, I wanted to write a book like Bridget Jones' Diary. The books that I was reading and loving, devouring at the time were in the chick lit genre. But, that was, everyone looked down at those kind of books. And so I thought, I should be writing something serious. So for years, even after finishing uni, I was trying to write what I call a weird combination of literary chick lit. And it's A, not a thing. B, I had no idea how to write. And so I was really trying to do what I thought I should be doing rather than what I wanted to be doing. And that was following the dream of writing the kind of thing I love to read. So a lot of advice for when you're writing a book is write what you know. I would say write what you love and what you want to know. So things that you can, be excited about researching, but also write the kind of book that you turn to when you have, a whole day to read, or we wish, or that, you can't wait to get a new release of. That's the type of book you should be trying to write. Anyway, it took me a while to learn this. I'm a slow learner, hence why it took me 15 years to get published. And then I remembered an article that we read at university about Mills and Boon books. Now, let's not be, mistaken here. They did not make us read the article. I just happened to read it when I was at university. And it was about romance novels and how you can make an absolute packet writing for Mills and Boon, and that there were a number of people in Australia doing this. And I thought, my friend and I actually, we were a couple of years post uni, both working in different non-related jobs. I'd actually just become a teacher and actually just had a baby. And we thought, why are we wasting our time trying to write the Booker Prize? Let's write a romance novel. How hard can that be? We're one of those stupid people, and there's plenty of them out there, who have no idea about the romance genre but decide that it's easy and that you just churn the books out because there's got to be a formula to those, easy books. So wrong, absolutely wrong. But in learning about romance novels, so I decided, I was going to read 50. I read 50 romance Mills and Boon books in a month, and then I was going to write one. And in learning about this, I discovered that romance novels were not what I imagined. They weren't all heaving bosoms and throbbing manhoods and all that kind of stuff. And they were really compelling stories between two people who had big emotional journeys to go on. And I fell in love with them. And at the same time, this is another reason why I think it took me so long to get published. When I first started writing, there was, the internet was a baby. You couldn't just Google how to write a book and find out. Anyway, so at the same time, when I started reading romance novels, I Googled, because that was a thing now, how to write a romance novel. And I discovered not only a whole load of actually articles and forums and information about writing romance books specifically, but I also discovered an organisation called the Romance Writers of Australia. And I joined them immediately. And through there, I started, and I'd still recommend that. It's one of my second tips when people ask how to write a novel: read lots, join Romance Writers of Australia, even if you're not a member. Not a member, even if you're not writing straight romance. most books have romantic elements. So anyway, I joined them and I started learning things that I should have learned at university. And finally, there's also connections through there. I got to meet publishers, I entered competitions, and I slowly started developing my craft, or it was like a writing apprenticeship, writing a number of books, workshopping them with other people, getting critique partners, entering competitions, getting feedback, going to conferences and workshops, whole load of stuff. And it just opened my eyes up to how to write a book in a way that I'd never seen before, I never had at university. And it also gave me a whole load of what's really important in writing is to find your tribe. And romance writers gave me a group of people who understood what I wanted to do, who loved romance and loved writing and loved books. And they're still my tribe. Anyway, so eventually through them, I wrote a book that was worthy of publication. And I won't go into that big, long journey, but just let you know, it took 15 years. And I did almost give up a couple of times during that time, especially right near the end. I know so many people that they're just about to give up and then they finally publish a novel. So I have many, many rejections to my name. And they hurt, but they prepare you for being a writer, because once you're a writer, you get rejected all the time by readers who say, hey, I didn't love that book. And it's so much easier to listen to that type of feedback than that many more people who say they loved your books. So I just thought, as well as telling you a bit about my books and my journey and my writing, I'd also share tonight some writing craft books, which I think have really helped me over the years. I'm a huge writing craft junkie. The shelves behind me, there's like 3 shelves there that have hundreds of writing craft books on them. And I've got some scattered over my desk. I haven't read most of them because I like the look of them and I like buying them, and I always think, oh, great, I'm going to buy this book and it's going to tell me how to write my next book much, much better. But there are some that I refer to time and time again when planning a book or when going into writing a book. So a little bit I thought I'd talk about these 2 books because they're my 2 latest books in different genres. So Just One Wish came out last year. It's actually the first book I ever wrote in first person, which could be a whole other live chat in itself, because writing in third person point of view and writing in first person was a big change, and I had a big learning curve. And I think it also alters the tone of the book. If I'd written this book, it's about 3 women, this book, but it's only from the point of view of one of them. If I'd written the book from the point of view of all 3 of them, it would have been quite a different story, because we would have had insight to their secrets, the tickings on in their mind, whereas we only had that of one woman. So Just One Wish is the story of 3 generations of women. One very strong grandma who's a diehard feminist and was a single mother and worked, is very, very, liberal in her views, and is that the word I meant? Sorry. Anyway, she's very independent. She's raised her daughter to think, she can do anything if she puts her mind to it. But her daughter didn't really like the upbringing. She found she was kind of bullied for her home situation. She was bullied because in the 60s she was the daughter of a diehard feminist and gay men. Because Grellis, who's the main character, had a baby with her best friend who was a gay guy, and then him and his partner sort of became the fathers at a time when this wasn't something that was, very, very usual or frequent. So she hated growing up in this kind of situation, this different situation. So she rebelled. And I thought, how do you rebel against your diehard feminist mother? Well, you get married young and you have a family and you devote yourself just to that and you don't worry about a career. So she's another strong woman in this book, and she's actually stumbled upon a career later in life by accident, by becoming an Instagram sensation as the happy, happy housewife. So I have these 2 very strong, different type of women. And I thought my idea for this book was what would it be like growing up with these 2 strong opposing women in your life who you love, the same, but, who do you listen to? Where do you sit as a woman if you've got these 2 very strong opposing forces in your life? So that was my idea behind this book. And this book is therefore a story of 3 generations of women and their relationship, as much as the other, there's a bit of romance in this book, but the main story is about how these women discover, that the people they're closest to, they may not actually know that well at all, and how they learn to, not judge and to accept people for who they are, blah, blah. And no one's black and white. We all have many, many different facets. So that's that book. And that's the latest in my sort of life lit genre, which is more not non-romantic relationships are the focus. So relations between friends, family, sisters, sometimes work colleagues, things like that. And these books I write differently to how I write a romance story. So I thought that's something interesting to discuss maybe as well. I'm just checking. Still no comments. I don't know if that's because there are no comments or because I'm just not seeing them. So I really apologise if it's because I'm not seeing them. So my other book, my most recent book, which is one with this big massive poster behind because I just did a book launch online, is Something to Talk About. Now this is a straight rural romance. It's about a female dairy farmer. She also runs an ice cream company or business, and she's an amputee. She was actually inspired by an old friend, boss of mine, who lost her arm to cancer at 19, and she's just the most amazing woman who's so motivational in terms of basically she's always optimistic, always sunny. She doesn't, let her disability get her down, and she doesn't let it stop her doing anything. She can knit, she can quilt, she can drive a motorbike, she can cover contact, we work in a library together. She can contact books better than anyone with 2 arms. So she was the inspiration for this character. And so she's a really strong, gutsy heroine. I love Tabitha, and the reviews so far have been great with Tabitha. Now, obviously, it's a rural romance, so we need a hero. So Tabitha also, I should say, is pregnant to donor sperm when the big book starts. She's decided, she's sick of waiting around for Mr. Right, and she's taking things into her own hands. But that's where she is at the beginning of this book. And then we meet Fergus, the hero. Now, a friend of mine who is a farmer said to me ages ago, why haven't you written a book about a teacher coming to town? Because anyone who's lived in small towns will know that it's often a thing where teachers or nurses will come to the town for, say, a year or 2 contract, and they'll end up never leaving because they marry a farmer. And I thought, yeah, you know what? I haven't written about that. And I can't actually think any rural romances that cover that sort of thing. So anyway, I started thinking about that, and I decided instead of making it a female teacher that came to town, which is often more often than not that happens in the country towns, I was going to have a male teacher come to town. And I played with a trope that often happens in rural romance, and that is, I guess, fish out of water. A city slicker thrown into a small country town, and kind of there's always so much conflict to play with there because, country towns, people who've come from the city often think, oh, it's going to be boring. Fergus, quiet. Fergus has got things he's running from in the city, and he just wants to sort of lay low for a little bit and lick his wounds, and he's hoping just to not be involved with the community and everything. And he learns that country life and small town life is not like that. Everyone's interested in him, everyone wants to know his business, everyone wants to set him up with everyone else. So it was a really fun novel to write. And of course, the only woman in town who's not seemingly interested in Fergus at the beginning is Tabitha, the heroine. And there was lots of fun banter between this. So I really love writing rural romance because you can really play with the banter and in the dialogue between 2 characters who like each other or are attracted to each other, but there's something keeping them from being together. Whether that is as in the instance of these 2, they sort of have it. The tagline says it's the opposite of love at first sight, or is it? So they kind of get off on the wrong foot a number of times, and so they're kind of enemies at the beginning of the book. Which is really, really fun to play with because, so it's the enemies to lovers trope that is in many romance books, because you've got 2 people who are wildly attracted to each other but don't want to be. There's a lot of fun and a lot of emotional conflict there. And at the core of romance novels is emotional conflict. Someone asked me what do I think makes a good romance the other day, and I came up with 3 things, and I hope I can remember them. But I believe a good romance needs to have emotion at its heart, strong conflict, and oh my goodness, what was the third? I really, really should remember that. Anyway, I just thought as well, as I said, I'll talk a little bit about the differences between writing rural romance as opposed to women's fiction. And I guess the main thing is, some people often ask me, get asked by journalists, sometimes readers at events, what do you like writing better? Do you like writing rural romance, or do you like writing women's fiction? And the answer is always, it depends what I'm writing at the time. So when I'm writing women's fiction, I want to be writing rural romance. When I'm writing rural romance, I want to be writing women's fiction, because I always think whatever I'm not doing is far easier. The reality is that they both have their challenges for different reasons. The good thing about writing romance, a lot of people say there's a formula to writing romance. A lot of romance authors take offense at that. And I would say formula, I don't know whether it's the right word or not, but like any genre fiction, there is a structure. There are certain boxes, or not boxes exactly, certain points in the story you need to tick off. As I said, you need two characters who are attracted to each other, but something keeping them apart. You need them to go both on an emotional kind of journey. You know that they're going to have a first kiss at some stage, probably a first love scene. You're going to have a big moment that sort of tears them apart. So there's those things to follow in a romance, so that I can hang my story on that kind of structure, and I know the structure. So it's a little bit safer in terms of knowing. For someone who doesn't plot, I'm not a plotter. I just start with two kind of characters and their issues, and I work from there. At least I've got kind of a map to follow, maybe that's the word. Whereas with women's fiction, each book is a little bit more different, because there isn't that romance necessarily to hang the rest of the plot on. There might be a romance in there, but it's not the main focus of the book. I've written books with 4 characters. I've written books with 3 multiple point of view characters, I've written books with only 1 character. I've written a book where we started with 2 main characters' point of views, and in the middle of the book, we swapped and we took one of those characters out and put another point of view character in. So the structure of the women's fiction books is harder, because I need to work out, each story is different, and I haven't got those sort of that quite the map sort of to follow in that, I guess. And also, in a romance, in my romance novels, we always have the hero's point of view and the heroine's point of view, and so you're seeing inside both their heads. Whereas often in my women's fiction books, you only see inside the heads of the women, even if there are men who have quite a strong story in there as well. So there's lots of different sort of ways to play with things. Oh, hang on. Oh my goodness, Jess, you're right. You're so right. I started at 5 o'clock rather than 5:30. Jess has just commented. I apologise to anyone about that. I guess I'll just keep going. So I can't see the comments on my laptop, but I can see them over here. And I am very, very early. So anyway, at 5:30, I think I'll just keep talking. And at 5:30, I'll come on. I will answer any questions and do a little bit of a recap. So where was I? So the difference between these two books. I might just, since now I've realised that I'm here way too early, and that there's a few people who might be arriving soon to watch this book. This video. Maybe I'll just quickly read a little bit of the book as part of what was going to happen. So I'm going to read a section in Something to Talk About, so how do I explain this? There's a section in this book. When you start a romance as well, I was also talking about how they've got that structure to follow, and I mentioned the word trope a bit. Trope is kind of a story that's been told a number of times. You've got Cinderella story, you've got fake engagements, you've got secret babies, you've got boss and employees. And one of the things, friends to lovers, enemies to lovers, they're those type of things that I was mentioning. In this book, I actually, when I first came up with the idea, because I knew there was going to be that sort of hate at first sight, that they would get off on the wrong foot, I also thought, I'm going to do a fake relationship with this book. I'm going to have these two decide to pretend to be together, because that will work out. I thought that would be a good way to sort of structure to hang this story on. And then, as I was writing the books and the characters started to come alive, I started to struggle, and I was really thinking, I don't think this is working out. I don't know what's wrong. And I was getting up to the point in the book where they would, one of them would suggest a fake relationship. And I thought, it doesn't feel right. And then I realised the reason it didn't feel right is because these two characters were not the type of person, the hero may suggest a fake relationship, Tabitha would not. And Tabitha is not the type of person who would agree to a fake relationship. So anyway, I thought, okay, we've got a problem. But I still really needed that scene for a number of reasons. So I'm going to read the scene to you where Fergus suggests a fake relationship. And how I got around the fact that it wasn't going to work for the plot, but I needed it to happen. Now, it is 5:30 now. Hello, everybody. I'm just going to quickly say hello again. I have completely stuffed up, and I apologise. I jumped on here at 5 o'clock for some reason. I was so excited to come talk to everyone. There's lots of people watching now, and I'm really sorry because I have just talked for half an hour, probably mostly to myself, because I came on early. I don't have no excuse. I am just all over the place at the moment. So I'm very sorry about that. So far, I've spoken a bit about my writing journey, how I started writing, the two genres I write, which are rural romance, which is what I got my start in, and sort of women's fiction, which I prefer to call life lit, which are relationship stories, but not focused solely on the romance. Sometimes there's romance in there. Sometimes there's not much. Anyway, I'm just about to read a scene from my latest book, which is a rural romance, because I've been talking about how I go about writing a rural romance, the structure that is in a romance, and tropes, which, so I'm going to read this scene and then talk a little bit about it. So Tabitha has just received some really bad news that her ex-boyfriend is coming back to town. Now, this is the guy. He left her when she lost her arm. They were in a band together. It's her only boyfriend she's ever had, and it was a long time ago. She's really, she's kind of moved on, but, you know, it's still there. And she's just found out that, he's coming back. And Fergus they're both at the hospital when she's found out, visiting various people. And Fergus comes outside to see if she's okay. So I'll just go, Tabitha, what is it? Are you okay? She cringed at the sound of Fergus's deep voice as the door banged shut behind him. He rushed over to her. Have you had bad news, or is it the baby? At his kind tone, a lump swelled in her throat and tears rushed to her eyes. As if this day could get any worse, now she was going to fall apart in front of someone who wasn't much more than a stranger. Taking a moment, she willed the lump to dissolve and the tears to back the hell away. Tabitha? She made the mistake of looking up into his face. His eyes were so warm and filled with concern that any hope she had of reining in her tears evaporated. I'm fine, she said through guttural sobs, as the tears that fell freely down her face made her out to be a liar. You don't look fine. Fergus wrapped an arm around her and ushered her over to the wooden bench. He dug a tissue out of his pocket and handed it to her. It's clean, I promise. Someone's always got a snotty nose at school, so having backup has become a bit of a habit. Do you need a drink of water? Should I call one of the nurses? No. The last thing she needed was a local getting wind of the fact she was falling apart over Ryder O'Connell. It was bad enough Fergus had stumbled upon her. Oh, Lord. She felt herself starting to hyperventilate again. This was freaking ridiculous. She buried her nose in the tissue and gave her tear ducts a good talking to. You're just in shock. Pull yourself together. Thank you, she said, after taking a deep breath. I'm okay. It's stupid, really. It didn't look stupid. He stared at her with those beautiful, big caramel eyes. She could see the stubble on his jawline, and that cologne she loved was stronger now he was so close. Tab swallowed. She had to tell him something after he found her in such a state. I just found out my ex-boyfriend is going to perform at the show in a few weeks, and She sighed. She really didn't want his pity, but nothing she could possibly say was going to put her in a non-pathetic light. It unnerved me. Your ex-boyfriend is in a band? Nope. Well, he's got musicians, I suppose, that back him up, but he's a sole performer, really. The name Ryder O'Connell ring any bells? Ryder O'Connell? His eyes bulged. Can't say I'm a fan, sorry. I'm more of a rock kind of guy, but of course I know him. You don't need to apologise for not being a fan, she said wryly. If you were, we might not be able to be friends anymore. Are you still in love with him? Tab didn't know how to answer that question. The time in her life when she'd been singing with Ryder had been so blissful and carefree. They'd been so in tune with each other. When they were writing songs, it was almost like they were in the same head. And when they sang together, people said it was magic. Probably because it was. They were so in love, in the way that only teenagers could be, so consumed with each other. Tab had ate, slept and breathed Ryder and believed he felt the same way about her. But when push came to shove, he chose the lure of fame over them and in the process shattered her heart. Anyway, so you can see them talking about this. And then Tab goes on and tells him about their background. And then, after a little bit, I'm going to read a little bit more now. This is where the part where I talked about before, where he decides to offer her a thing. a fake relationship. Where are we? Okay. Again, her voice drifted off. Her feelings were so stupid she couldn't even put them into words. You know, ignore me if this is a stupid idea, but he stalled, then shook his head. Nah, forget it. Tell me, she urged, nudging him in the side with her little arm. You can't begin a sentence like that and then leave a girl hanging. Okay. He took a quick breath. Why don't we pretend to be together? So that when he's here, Ferg flushed a little as he tried to explain. It was super cute. I just thought maybe if you have someone at your side, you'd feel, I don't know, less vulnerable. You mean like a fake boyfriend? She was about to laugh, then realised he was serious. I'm not offering for entirely selfless reasons, he admitted. You'd be doing me a favour as well. Carrie is getting pretty persistent in her advances, and she's not the only one. Maybe if people thought you and I were together, they'd leave me the hell alone. For a moment, Tab was almost tempted, but no one would ever believe that. He blinked. Why not? Now she did laugh. Have you seen yourself in the mirror lately? It was a rhetorical question, but she took the opportunity to run her eyes slowly down his body as she listed his credentials. You have the most startling eyes I've ever seen. You have a great body and a lovely smile when you care to share it. Hell, even your grimace is more attractive than some people's grins. My grandmother thinks the phrase tall, dark and handsome was created for you. A corner of a smile appeared on his face. But it's not just your looks. You're great with the kids in your class, and the way you pitched in to help search for Mrs. Lord, the way you help with the cricket after school hours, all these things are noted and appreciated in the country. You're about as eligible as it's possibly eligible to be. Whereas me, she shrugged. I'm just a pregnant plain Jane with no arm. He raised his eyebrows, but didn't shy away from her gaze as he said, From where I'm looking, you have an arm and a half, and can do more with what you've got than most people I know can do with two. But even if you had no arms, so what? There's nothing plain about you, Tabitha Cooper Jones. If I wasn't sworn off women? Tab tried to laugh, but that damn lump in her throat returned. She wasn't used to people bathing her in compliments, even if she knew his compliments were as fake as his proposition. So what do you say? Will you be my pseudo-girlfriend? Part of her was hugely tempted. How wonderful would it feel to have a guy like Fergus McWilliams at her side over the next month or so? How much more confident would she feel about facing Ryder again if she were in a relationship? Maybe people might even believe it if they held hands and stuff like that. Her insides twisted a little at the thought. But even if it did get her through seeing Ryder again, inevitably it would have to end, and then everyone in town would feel sorry for her again. She could already imagine what people would say behind closed doors and whispered hands, and she didn't want mortification and pity for the few minutes of security it would give her to be able to introduce Fergus as her boyfriend. No, she whispered, taking Fergus's warm hand in hers. I don't play games. I might have had a few wobbly moments, but I don't need a man to make me feel good about myself. But thank you for listening and for your offer. It was a very sweet one. And to show her appreciation, she leaned in to kiss his cheek, but, not expecting her to lay one on him, he moved his head at the last moment and she ended up kissing him on the mouth instead. Sorry, I just got a text message from a friend saying, I thought you were doing it at 5:30. Yes, so did everyone. Sorry. Anyway, if you have any questions, so that was a section I just read where Fergus, one of my main characters, offered the other main character a fake relationship, because fake relationship is a trope that often happens in romances. And when I set out to write the book, I thought that's a good thing. They'll throw them together. They'll have lots of, they'll be able to pretend, when you're pretending to be in love with someone for somebody else, sometimes your feelings develop. So that was what I thought I was going to do. The problem was my characters weren't the type of people. Oh dear, someone's trying to call me. The characters weren't the type of people that would do that. They would. Well, the hero might offer and then regret it. The heroine was definitely not the type of person that would do it. So I realised I had to change my story. I had to listen to my characters, and that's the type of thing that happens a lot with my writing, because I'm not a plotter. I'm the type of person who comes up with a loose premise, and then I focus a lot on my characters before I start writing, and I make them real people. I've run a couple of workshops about how to write people rather than how to write characters. And so that is when those characters come alive, they can direct the plot and change things, and that's what happened in this book. Has anyone got any questions they want to know? So I have been talking for 40 minutes when I should only have been talking for 10. And a lot of people have missed how I started and how I write real romance and women's fiction, and how they're quite different to write, even though they're similar in some ways. So I have done a lot of that, and you can go back and watch that because I don't want to repeat myself. So what I thought, unless there's any questions, I might share with you a few of the books that help me continually as a writer. As I mentioned before, I'm not a plotter. I love the idea of plotting my stories. Often I get to 80,000 words and I wish I was a plotter. Actually, many people who've written or are writers or want to write will have heard there's plotters and there's pantsers, sorry. So plotters are people who know exactly what's going to happen in the book before they start. They write outlines. Some can be really detailed. Some even know what's happening scene by scene. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we have pantsers who just sit down on a computer one day or open a notebook and decide I'm going to write a book, and they just write whatever comes into their head. Now, I'm sure you'll probably agree. I don't think anyone is completely a plotter or completely a pantser. We all fall somewhere in the spectrum. And I do know when I say I don't plot, I know a lot about my characters before, and I know the premise that I'm writing. I know that often, hopefully, like a question that I want to answer. And so I think about a lot of things, these sort of things before I start, but I don't necessarily know how I'm going to answer that question or what journey my characters are going to go on to get where I want them to be. Obviously, they've got to be different at the beginning to the end. So what I do a lot of before I start writing a book, whether it's a romance book or whether it's a women's fiction book, is I do character work. And I make my characters into real people. One of the things there's two things that really are useful, I find, in this process. And there's two books that help me a lot. The first book is Heroes and Heroines. It's called The Complete Writer's Guide to Heroes and Heroines, 16 Master Archetypes. I covered this book a few years ago because it was starting to fall apart. I've used it so many times. Now, this is a book that tells you it's got 8 female archetypes and 8 male archetypes, so you can mix and switch them around and mix them up. And so I have an idea when I go into the book, like say with Tabitha, I knew she was a really strong, gutsy kind of person who's like the eternal bridesmaid, gets along really well with guys, but doesn't necessarily is not so well in the romance relationship with them. So I flicked through the book, and the female archetypes are, I could probably tell you off the top of my head, the boss, seductress, crusader, librarian, girl next door, the waif, the free spirit, and the spunky kid. Now, the spunky kid is kind of your girl next door, and there's different ways she can be that. So in this book, for the spunky kid, it tells you the type of person the spunky kid is, and then it goes a bit into more details, and it tells you the virtues someone who's a spunky kid might have. So, say, sense of humour, reliable, supportive, and then it tells you sort of the flaws that someone of this type of character might have: sarcastic, unassuming, skeptical. But then it goes into even more detail, and it kind of tells you the background, what their childhood may have been like, details. And then it tells you the styles. There's often 2 types for each archetype. So for the spunky kid, might be the girl next door, or they might be the working girl. And it goes into a lot of detail. It tells you occupations this person might have. It tells you how they will react to certain things. And it just really helps me, I find, often. Like I'm planning a book at the moment, and I've got 4 main characters. It's a women's fiction. And I've chosen an archetype for each of them. I chose that on gut feeling, how they were kind of developing in my head. But the characters, as I read through the archetypes, the characters came alive a lot more for me. So I just checked if there was any more questions. So I really, really recommend that. If you're I recommend this kind of book, whether you're a plotter or a planner. No, it's the same thing. A plotter or pantser. I actually say I'm a prayer. I sit down and like please make this work. Because it really can just give you ideas on how to make your character more real. Like, these are not stereotypes, they're archetypes, just quite different to a stereotype. And although I've written, a number of girls next door, a number of librarian heroines, a number of boss heroines, and to the guys, I've written, a lot of lost souls, I've written some charmers, I've written a best friend. Those characters are very different across all the books I've read, because these help me grow them into real people. But it's my voice, it's their job, it's their hobbies, all these other things you add detail that make them different. And of course, it's the actual premise of the book changes it. So that's a really, really good book. Another thing that people who are writing might be interested in is, and you may have heard of them, is the Thesaurus guides. They're books by Angela Ackerman and Becca Puglisi. they've got a website, and I'm just trying to think what it is. I should know this. Hang on, let me look it up quickly. Writers Helping Writers, a fabulous website with a whole load of information. But they also have these awesome books. They've got about 6 now. I've got 5 of them. And the 2 that I use the most, one is the Emotion Thesaurus. So when I'm planning a character, whether it's a rural romance or a women's fiction book, I need to know what has shaped that character. So, for example, I'll open a page of this. So one of the wounds that could have shaped is failing to save someone's life. And this book says, this sort of gives you examples of how someone might fail to save someone's life, the false beliefs that they might come to develop about themselves because of that, things they may fear if they fail to save someone's life, possible results and responses to what they might do to other things, traits that might develop from this, triggers that might aggravate the wound. So they also help you with plotting. But so these are the things I know kind of before I'm going into a book. I know who the characters are in terms of what type of person they are, how they will react to various things, whether they're a nurturer, whether they're outgoing, whether they're a bit more introverted. I know those sorts of things. So I'm just going back to the comments page to make sure it's in. Oh, what is the full title of that book? Skylar, I'm not sure which book you mean. The first book I talked about, I will say it now, is The Complete Writer's Guide to Heroes and Heroines, 16 Master Archetypes. I'll type that at the end up there in the actual comments and reply to you, or I do it now, or board tears. The other one that I've just been talking about now is called The Emotional Wound Thesaurus. Fabulous book, because each character you create must have something that's happened to them that has made them believe sort of something about themselves that not necessarily is negative, but it's wrong, so that they can have a growth and they can go on a journey to recover from that. So that's a really good book, Skylar, as well. And another thing, that's very, very useful, and this is not so much in that initial planning stage, but another book that I really love. So these books I use for planning. Another book I really love is also in the Thesaurus Guide, and that's the Emotion Thesaurus. So, when you're like, someone was feeling sad, and you don't just want to say they felt sad. You need to describe, how they felt internally, different things. I've looked up embarrassment. So this guide lists a number of different emotions that your characters will go through. And then so for each emotion, so we've got embarrassment here, defines it. So a lack of composure due to self-conscious discomfort. And then it gives you physical signs and behaviours that someone might display if they're embarrassed. But then it goes on, and there's a whole page of them, like pulling at one's collar, rubbing the back of one's neck, wincing, flinching away, knees pulling up together. There's lots of different physical things that they may do if they're feeling embarrassed. But it also tells you their internal sensations that they might be feeling. So a bit lightheaded, tightening chest, rushed breathing and a rapid heart rate. So it kind of, for each emotion, it tells you physical, internal, and then mental responses. So a mental response to embarrassment might be panicked thoughts, compulsion to flee. There's just a couple of examples. I'm not reading them all. And then it tells you acute or long-term responses for this emotion. So you might burst into tears, run from the room, plummeting self-esteem. And then it says signs the emotion is being suppressed. So maybe a fake smile, trying to laugh something off, pretending not to have heard. So this is a really, really good book when you want to make your writing a little bit more original and you don't want to say he was embarrassed or his cheeks turned red, you want to get inside the head more. So that's another book which I find very, very useful in my day-to-day writing. Some oldies but goodies. So one of the things I said earlier was when I was at uni, I wasn't taught anything about how to write or characters or anything really. One of the very first workshops I went to at a Romance Writers Conference was called GMC, and there was about this book by Deborah Dixon, which is hard to get a copy of, but if you can, it's well worth it. And basically GMC is the core of any good fiction, the building blocks. So it's a goal. All characters must have strong goals, but not only a goal. They can't just want to save enough money to buy a house, or they can't just want to get that promotion. There must be real motivation behind why they want that. And we have to really feel it and understand it. And often important, the more important it is, if it's a life or death thing, if they don't get it, it's even better, even if it's a metaphorical life or death. So this book really explains goals, motivation, and the third thing, conflict, which you need in books, which is what, stupidly, I never even thought about at university. All my books were people just kind of having chats and going on dates, and, it was all very nice. So, sorry, just looking at the comments again. If anyone's got any other questions, please chuck them up there now. So, yeah, this book really sort of gives you really good nuts and bolts explanation of what goal, motivation, and conflict, which are the core building blocks of good fiction. And it gives you examples from movies that we've all seen. Like, I'm pretty sure Finding Nemo is one. I'm trying to remember the others. It's been a while since I looked in this book. So that's a really, really great sort of book to start your journey in writing and to refer back to. I actually had a great chat today with a story guru, Michael Haig, who his website, is it storymastery.com. He's an amazing a story guru, like coach, writing coach, screenwriters, novelists, and advertising. Sorry, I'm just taking some of my drink. And one of the things he mentioned, we were brainstorming and workshopping some things this morning. One of the things he mentioned to me was when you're not, like, because I struggle with plot a lot, and I say that, that's what I was saying to him, I feel like I need help with my plot. He said, and reminded me, that when you're struggling with plot, often the real reason why you don't know what should happen, or you're not sure, what the story is about, is because your character's goals are not strong enough and they're not meaningful enough, and meaning the readers won't care and there's nothing that they can chase. So really, this is so important in fiction. You've got to get the goals and motivations clear and right. And then, I'm not going to give you a lecture about all that, but that's another book I found really great. And just a really inspirational book, which I found, and I mean to reread this again, is Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic. It's a little bit woo-woo in that it talks about how ideas are out swimming around and they land on a person. I love this, though. They land on a writer and then they sort of decide, to, I've got to see another comment there. I'm going to come and second that. Anyway, so Big Magic talks about how ideas are swimming all around and then they choose someone to land on. They go and land on you, and then, they tap on your shoulder and say, hey, this is my idea, write me. And if you kind of ignore it, or you've got another idea focusing on, then eventually the idea might get sick of waiting for you and go and find somebody else. And she uses some really good examples about how that happened. But it's just a really inspiring book about living creatively and living as a writer. So it's not just about writing, but I think it's very, very suitable for writers. So that's a really, really good book. And Kath has asked, can you please list all the books you're referencing at the end? And yeah, what I'll do, I'm hoping I'll still be able to comment after I end the stream. But if not, somehow I'll put them on my page or something. I'll make sure you get a list of these books. So has anyone got any other specific questions about writing? As I said, I'm really sorry because I know I started talking about writing a lot before many of you came on because I was early. And I was talking kind of about the differences between writing rural romance as opposed to writing women's fiction and how I go about that. But yeah, so is there anything anyone else would like me to answer about? Well, probably not plot because I'm not very great at that, but about writing and how I go about doing different books. What would you like to know? I'm thinking that that's maybe it, and that there are no other questions. But I'm just going to ramble for a few more seconds in case someone does want to write a question. Thank you, firstly. I should have said this right at the beginning, but thank you to Underground Writers for having me tonight on your YouTube channel. Sorry I stuffed up the time and therefore, everyone's probably very confused. So thank you very much. It's been an honour to be here and talking to people about books and writing because it's what I love to do. And yeah, I'm definitely excited to see who else comes up and has the chat. I'm just trying to think whether there was anything else I was told to talk about. Mostly it was just the two books, how I got into writing. But just to recap, the things that people always ask about writing are where do you get your ideas from, and what's your greatest tips for a new writer or someone who wants to be a writer. Skylar, your talk has been so full of info that I don't have any questions. Oh, thanks, Skylar. I'm sorry I got a little bombarded, or was it bamboozled by the timing thing. But I will just close by saying, these two things. So answering the question about where does inspiration come from, and also what are my tips. Now, I've already told you some of the tips. My biggest tip is to read as much as you can. Other thing I would say is to actually, and this is something I need to do more often myself, because often when you're trying to write, and for many, many years, I was a writer who was trying to write without it being my full-time job. So I was squeezing my writing into, kids' nap times, if they slept late at night, when everyone was in bed, just squeezing it wherever I could. And so reading actually was hard. I still read a lot, but reading was, something else that I had to squeeze in my time. And often it was, do I read or do I write? But it is important to read. But one thing that I lost for all those years where I was trying to write is watching TV. I did not watch enough TV and I did not watch enough movies. And watching TV and movies is great as well as reading. You get different things from both. But I've been watching a lot more TV lately and trying to watch movies. And movies, you can see the structure of stories, which is often very similar. Another book, that I really love is Save the Cat Writes a Novel. Now, the original Save the Cat book was about writing movies, and it was by Blake Snyder. But it shows that the beats that you see in a movie are the same kind of beats you need to hit in a novel. So watching TV and watching movies can really help. So as a writer, that's all work. If you're reading a book, if you're watching TV or writing, you can say, hey, everyone, I'm working hard. So that's my biggest tip. And the other one, as I said, is join an organisation. I would recommend Romance Writers Australia or your local Writers Centre. There's so many great ones now, much better than when I first started. But if you're serious about writing too and you want to make a career out of writing, then be careful. Make sure you join an organisation that is really a professional organisation where people have the same goals as you. Because it's fine if you're a hobby writer, that's great. And, it's sometimes I wish I was still just a hobby writer. But if you want to make it a career, you want not only to be getting the craft, but you want to be getting business stuff and people, inspiring you in that way, and sort of other people lifting you up and helping you. So I would definitely recommend joining an organisation that is a professional organisation and where you'll meet people that are as determined as you to make it in this industry. And some more questions there. I'll get to that in a second. And so that's my talk. Read lots, watch TV, join an organisation. Don't give up. Keep writing. Don't be afraid to write crap. That's definitely one that all these things I have to keep telling myself too. And trust the magic. Oh, and the other thing I would say is don't compare what you're writing at the moment and your first draft to whatever you're reading in the book. Read to learn and read for enjoyment, but try not to compare. It's really hard. If you work out how not to compare yourself to other people, please let me know, because it's a hard thing to do. But remember that whatever you're writing, your first draft is, nobody has to see that, and it's not the same as the book you're going to get off the shelf when you go to Dimmicks or Big W or wherever, because that book has been edited to a note. It's not, it's been through structure edits, copy edits, proofreading, better reading, a whole load of other stuff. And so remember that, your first draft can be crap, and, nobody needs to see it, and you've got time to make it work. Now, as for ideas, because that's the other thing people often say or ask, where do you get your ideas from? And I'm sure anyone who's watching this will know how crazy a question that is, because ideas come from everywhere, and sometimes I feel like they're nowhere. There seems to be two types of writers. I talked earlier about two types of writers, the one that wanted to be a writer forever and the one who comes to writing later in life, often through therapy. But there's another two types, and that's someone who has a billion ideas and they will never have all the time in the world to write all their ideas, and that freaks them out. And then other type of person is someone who really only has like one idea at a time. I'm much more like the one idea at a time person. In the earlier days of writing, I used to always have an idea kind of come to me in the middle of writing a book, which was very, very frustrating, because it was like you'd be writing, and then suddenly you'd get a brand new idea that was so much better than the one. You always think it's better than the one you're writing now. And so you'd have to sort of tell that idea to wait, to be patient, and try and finish the other one. But it always was very comforting to me to have that idea kind of waiting at the sidelines for me, because I knew, oh, it's okay, I've got an idea, you know. Whereas now I don't always have an idea when I finish a book or when I'm writing one book, and that can be stressful in itself in a different way, because it's like, what if I never get another good idea? Well, my tip and my good kind of hopefully positive, uplifting feedback there is you can manufacture ideas. If you're a commercial fiction writer and you end up having to write, one book a year, sometimes you probably will have to manufacture ideas. Inspiration doesn't just always strike. But the more you learn about story, the more you learn about character, you can manufacture those ideas. And that's by, say in romance, you create a really strong hero and a really strong hero, and you work out what's going to make them clash. And that's why those things such as archetypes, goal, motivation, conflict, and the wounds of what, creating someone's happened in the past. If you've got two characters that are really strong and have strong backstory, motivations, goals, they'll create a story for you. So you can manufacture ideas. So ideas are everywhere. They're in newspapers, they're on TV shows, they're in the conversations you have with your friends. But don't be scared if they don't come. Like, you can create them. Hopefully that makes sense. I'm just seeing if anyone's got any other final questions. No. Anyway, I hope that's been slightly useful. I apologise again for being late. If anyone does ever have any questions, you're welcome to message me on my Facebook page. I will try in a second to put all those books that I listed in the comments section. And yeah, thank you for listening. I hope it's been slightly useful. Bye.